was a big notch on his resume for Seth Manfield. We've talked about him so much here this weekend. Make another run towards the top 8. Multiple-time Grand Prix champion is a player on your right. He's also your current world champion, and right now he's the #1 player in the world.
Majors a couple of years ago, no top 8 performances, but a lot of Pro Tour success, was solidly on the Pro Tour, and then kind of bottomed out and has regathered himself through Grand Prix, through Open Series events. I think his attitude towards the game and his own professional career is a lot more mature now, and it's starting to pay off with some really good results.
We'll see how many cards Seth is going to start with here. Again, we watched him draft that blue-red deck, and it was a really nice one here. For Majors, he's got a little bit of an Esper thing going on, it appears. Black Splash, I maybe missed that, analyzing?
1 Plains in Majors' deck. I'm trying to look for what that would be for. No white cards. Now trying to look for a Converge spell.
Card, yeah.
I don't have it.
All right, fair
it's
enough.
Here for something.
Okay.
I don't have it.
We'll figure it out soon enough. These players will be clear for takeoff here in just a minute. Majors going to start off with an island. We are underway here in round number 14 between Majors and Manfield. Island to start here for both players. Michael will pick up an island for his draw step. There's a mountain. He's on the board early here with the Kozilek's Channeler.
Excuse me. No, he does not have a Plains. He has a foil Plains registered in his deck. Rooting for Majors.
You respect that a lot.
Drafting the foil land.
He's the one that actually took it, so we clearly know who Patrick is rooting for. A land and a passing of the turn here. For Manfield, just another land. Nothing too crazy going on. Slow start here for both players. Majors getting in a few chip shots, playing some lands, just simply passing the turn back. But again, he can play a real tempo game here with all these clutch occurrence. Seth with a 4th land, he'll pass the turn back. Majors maybe a little surprised not to see a play there from Manfield, but he'll just serve in for 1 yet again. Will Michael. Manfield going to fall down to 17. There's land number 5, will pass the turn back. Nothing too impressive here for either player.
One at a time.
Working them down. An island here for Seth. And it's a Mist Intruder, leaving up 3 mana. Feels like a spell shrivel to me.
Pretty suspicious, given the way the first couple turns have played out here. I think Majors was just really hoping Manfield would tap out for something so he could awaken a clutch, get him for some real damage. Now he has to play around what is likely a spell shrivel.
There's the Mist Intruder, not that big of a deal, but not sure if Michael can actually work through the 1-2 at this point. But these players kind of jockeying for position right now. Major's able to get in a few hits to start, and now Manfield leaving up 3 mana. Major's a pretty savvy limited player. Probably gonna be able to see through that and see that there is probably a counterspell hanging out there. Could be Spell Shrivel, could be Scatter to the Winds as well. He is gonna play the clutch with Awaken, however. Gonna see if he can get this to resolve. He's got so many of them, you might as well try one, right?
Yeah, he's got him to spare, and Majors there, I'm willing to bet, would have given significant odds that card was in Manfield's hand. It was just an issue of how he wants to sequence his spells.
Spell Shrivel does take care of the clutch. Here comes Mist Intruder. An island exiled as well.
Manfield saying that that's exiled. Majors confirming, yes, it is.
Yeah, it's all exiled right now. There's Wavewing Elemental. Now, these are the kind of things you want to clutch.
Yes, this is an opening here for Majors to do some real damage here with a clutch.
He's got a Wavewing Elemental of his own and simply pass the turn back. Again, remember, Michael Majors, 4 clutch, 2 coastal discoveries. And at one point in the draft, Seth actually had to pass one of those clutches. He was a little hesitant to do so.
Yeah, he took Vile Aggregate. Also, a very powerful card in its own right. I think he was a little worried about having enough creatures to play early on in the game.
There's an island. Here come the beatdowns. Keep in mind, landfall trigger there for the Wavewing Elemental. So it's a 5/6 flyer that's coming into the red zone here.
Also getting in with the 1/2 into a 3/4. If I were in a Major seat, the card I'm most likely suspecting is Touch of the Void.
Touch of the Void, sure.
That's my guess. This is much worse.
This is significantly worse. It's actually a copy of Sure Strike.
This is much worse news for Majors. I think he was hoping to get a high-quality removal spell and the Mist Intruder for his trouble.
This ends up being a very nice turn for Seth. He's able to use Sure Strike, have his creature win the battle, and then follow things up with a Shatter Skull Recruit before passing the turn back. Manfield starting to take over this game. Major's got some real work to do on the comeback trail. It's an incubator drone, and Eldrazi Spawn will be joining it.
And that spot there is so hard for Majors to play around because there's nothing else for Manfield to do with a Touch of the Void at that spot. There's 2 4-toughness creatures on the table. That just looks like what the attack is. Sure Strike, worst case scenario.
Yeah, what's great about Sure Strike, and this is something I like as limited players, I love the bad tricks that people don't really pay attention to because they just don't play around them as much.
Yeah, I like the Mighty Leap in Magic Origins Limited.
Me too.
No one plays around the Mighty Leap.
The one that was one of my favorites was Mending Hands in Kamigawa Block.
Oh, yeah.
Who played around that pile of garbage? Nobody.
Nobody. Another really good spot for Sure Strike. Guess Manfield doesn't have the second copy.
Yeah, I guess who's going to play around the second copy? That's when you want the second copy. When he's able to get that Shattered Skull Recruit off of the battlefield. And now there's a Deathless Behemoth here for Seth. He'll pass the turn back over to Michael. Remember, Michael has one of those in his deck as well. Majors with an island in hand along with a couple of other cards.
This game was kind of back and forth. That 7th turn from Manfield, that turn was beautiful.
Yep.
And Majors has not been able to claw back in. And Manfield has had some very productive plays past that point as well.
It's one of those times where in limited, and we say this a lot with Obzon and Constructed, right? 2 spells in 1 turn, always a backbreaker. It's tough for Obzon to get to. It's tough for limited decks to get to have 2 high-impact spells in 1 turn, but we saw that just then. And that's why Manfield's ahead here, and Majors is on the back foot trying to figure out how to catch up.
And I think Majors was assuming that was going to be the turn. It was just going to involve the Mist Intruder dying and Manfield following up with a 4-mana play instead of a 5-mana play.
For Michael, it's going to be a Coastal Discovery, and he's going to awaken the island. So, a 4/4 island has been awoken, and he's going to draw 2 cards. Mountain is 1. Mountain is 2. Not sure if he needs any more lands or not, but he's got plenty to work with. I believe he's got a copy of Tightening Coils in hand, but he'll just pass the turn back here. Manfield will untap and draw. Remember, Seth does have 2 copies of Brutal Expulsion in his deck. We didn't see him play 1 in the previous round. You have to imagine we'll see 1 at some point here, but for now, both creatures coming in, there will be a chump block. Mist Intruder will come. Ingest trigger. A Valakut Predator is gone. The follow-up here for Seth as he taps 3 mana is a Nettle Drone. Seth with just 1 card left in hand. Michael's the one that's got all the cards. A couple of them are lands. See if he can actually convert those cards into something useful. Mountain is the play to start. Here's 5 mana. There's the clutch. Remember, 4 of those in his deck. That's the second one he's played. Deathless Behemoth goes up. 7/7 land, and he's getting aggressive. I like it.
Not a lot to be done on the way back here. I mean, it's not like Majors can block very productively against a flyer and an Nettle Drone, so you might as well start attacking.
I like the aggression, though. You got to get through that Tightening Coils creature anyway, so let's get that off the battlefield. That's fine. And we could see a repeat maybe next turn if he's got another clutch, something like that. He's at 12 right now. Behind, there is Tightening Coils past the turn back. Over to Manfield. We know he's got Deathless Behemoth in hand.
Among the worst Tightening Coils targets in the format.
Not great. Not great. But whatever it takes. Mist Intruder going to mosey on along here for 1. An Ingest trigger. Take care of a Boiling Earth. Nettle Drone will fire away. Major's going to fall down to 10. And now I think we'll see that Deathless Behemoth again. We will, and that'll untap the Nettle Drone. Back to Majors. He'll draw. It's a mountain. Quite a few lands in hand here for Michael. And maybe he's got to put the brakes on here with the 7/7 island. He'll start by playing a mountain, however.
I think it's very tough to attack right here because Manfield has another chump block that he gets. Gets to shoot for 1, knocks Majors down to 10, untaps, attacks for 7 down to 3.
There's the clutch again. I like this play here from Michael. He's going to split it up a little bit where he's got the counters. Now he's going to come across with 2 creatures. And if Manfield does elect to block here with that Titan Coils creature, it'll die no matter what because it's got 1 toughness. So he'll probably jump in front of the biggest creature, but Michael's able to continue to get some damage across here.
Manfield is very likely to be chump blocking here anyway, so you might as well spread.
Yeah. And if you were curious just how good Clutch Occurrence is, it's on display this game.
Yeah, Majors has worked himself back into this one by drawing a lot of copies of this card.
Now, he's only got 1 left. He's got 4 in his deck, but it has been very good. Now, also for what it's worth, if Manfield finds his copy, he can bounce that 7/7 land and undo everything Michael's done here.
I like Manfield taking the hit here. He's likely to chump block with the Nettle Drone anyway, but he wants to wait 1 more turn because he gets a point of damage for his troubles.
Sure.
Actually 2 because he gets another trigger off of casting the Deathless Behemoth.
Also true. So Seth does take the hit for 10, falls down to 7. And now we head back Seth's way, and we know he's got that copy of Deathless Behemoth in hand. Nine to 7 in favor of Majors right now. Close one. Here comes Mist Intruder. Get in for 1, knock Majors down to 8, trigger, Ingest, Mountain, gone. Second main phase here for Manfield. Last time we saw him shoot with the Nettle Sentinel, play Deathless Behemoth, untap the Nettle Sentinel, pass the turn back. Curious to see if he wants to go that route again.
Seems like a good place to be. And again, he gets that chump block with the Nettle Drone no matter what. And Majors cannot block the Behemoth other than with a 7/7, which likely has to attack to continue to put the pressure on Manfield.
Nettle Drone does fire away. This time Seth only with 4 mana, not 6.
That will qualify as an answer.
That's a brutal expulsion. That will qualify, as you say. Island goes back to the grip. Deal 2 damage to the island. That's kind of whatever. Leave a tunneling Geopede, and there's an island. That'll trigger. And now Seth is slowly chipping away, but he's also slowed down Michael's draw.
Yeah, that was huge. And remember, the last card left over in Manfield's hand is not a small one.
Yep, it is a Deathless Behemoth. There's an island there for Majors. Now he's got to slow down. There's a shot there from the Nettle Drone. Majors is going to fall down to 5. Manfield's untapping. He's got to be feeling pretty good about things. Manfield will draw. There's a mountain. That'll trigger the tunneling Geopede. Here come the attacks. 3/3 will get in front of the tunneling Geopede. They'll trade. Mist Intruder will get in a hit. Majors will fall down to 3. There's an Ingest. There goes his own Deathless Behemoth. Feels like we're in a mirror match here.
Pretty close to it, and I think Manfield's about to wrap this one up. Majors needs to remove the Nettle Drone and everything else in play, and I think that's going to be asking a little too much.
Nettle Drone's going to untap. Majors with a Spell Shrivel. Okay. That's step 1 here for Michael.
Still got to answer 2 things.
Yes, he does. He'll draw. That's not going to do it. Seth Manfield's going to win game number 1 here over Michael Majors. The Blue-Red Mirror right now is going to the World Champion as he is currently up a game.
Did a very good job of navigating his way through all those copies of Clutch of Currents there. And again, that sure strike turn. I don't think that trick was on Majors' radar, but it was the perfect one for Manfield to have.
So now, typically in instances like this, if we were covering a constructed tournament, we take a look at the sideboards. We have smaller sideboards and some off-color cards to take a look at here for both players. But you see both players right now, they're grabbing those unsleeved cards. Michael's put 2 cards on the table that he's happy with. We see Seth maybe pulling and pushing in some cards out of his deck. Anything that you see as you have Major's deck list in front of you?
Major's got a copy of Dispel, and that seems like a very good one to have for the Blue-Red Mirror match, especially with Manfield having some counter spells and Spell Shrivel and Brutal Expulsion. There's going to be a lot of spots where Seth is trying to set up Majors to walk into those counter spells and being able to play something and fire into the counter spell with Dispel. A very good tempo swinger card I imagine Majors is bringing in. For Manfield, he's playing all the red cards that he drafted. He's playing most of the blue cards he's drafted. What's in the board here for Manfield that he didn't play that's blue? He's got a Dispel of his own, which I think I would probably like if I'm Seth. He's got 3 copies of Tightening Coils. We'll get to that in a second, and then another copy of Wavewing Elemental.
if he wants to get another flyer here. Now, Tightening Coils is interesting. You think about how that game just played. You saw 3 Clutch of Current. You saw a Coastal Discovery. Maybe you want to give those creatures minus that power?
I don't think it's necessarily a bad strategy. I think it's just kind of a weak card in the matchup in general. The games are going to involve a lot of chump blocking with those kind of things, especially with large creatures on the ground. Tightening coils on smaller stuff just leads to mopey turns where you have to attack in, they get a chump block out of it, and they're racing back. You saw that in that game with Majors where he drew multiple copies of Tightening Coils, and Manfield got to manage the damage race with timely chump blocks.
Unclear if Seth's going to bring in any of those copies of Tightening Coils. We had a feeling that he wasn't going to play them after the draft was over.
Yes.
It seemed like pretty easy cuts, kind of incongruous with what his deck is trying to do, but can be a useful sideboard card in specific matchups, and going to the skies in this sort of matchup, both for offense and defense, might lead him to bring in, that other copy of Wavewing Elemental.
Yeah, I think that card's probably too low in power. He might be interested in the Dispel, though.
Sure. Well, these players shuffling up here for game number 2. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan here at Grand Prix Atlanta, hosted by StarCityGames.com at SCG Live. Hashtag GPAtlanta all weekend for your tweets as we are in round number 14, watching the #1 player in the world and the current world champion here in Seth Manfield with his blue-red deck. We watched him draft it. Now we're watching him play it. He won last round against Doug Lambert. Now this round he's playing against Michael Majors, currently up a game. For Seth, he's got to go undefeated through the pod to be able to make the top 8 here and join at least one player already, the Muss Man, Dan Musser, who's locked up his spot in the top 8, and he had to beat somebody pretty good to do it last round there in John Finkel.
And we know Tom Martell, Owen Turtwald, they're in similar set of circumstances right now.
They are. Right on the cusp are those 2 great players. It's shaping up to be a pretty nice draft pod to close out our day.
Yeah. Top 8's looking to be pretty good.
Yes, it is. For Michael Majors, his deck, 4 Clutch of Currents, 2 Coastal Discoveries. Those are the highlights there. For Seth Manfield, 2 Brutal Expulsions. And aptly named as that one, that game was pretty good.
Yes. Was looking like he had the game mostly under control. It was just a question of whether or not he could answer the 7/7. Any bounce spell would have done.
Now, curious here. Play, draw, any changes you think?
Against a deck with the counter spells that Manfield has, that he showed in that game, I would probably play.
Probably play?
Yeah.
Well, both players.
Also, Majors with 2 copies of Coastal Discovery, so he can make up the cards that way.
Sure. Wow. Ari Lax has already lost his match to Brian Easton 2-0. That was going to be our backup match. That's the other side of this pod for what it's worth. So Brian Easton is playing the winner of this match. He is also 11-2. And the winner of that match likely to make top 8. So congratulations to Brian Easton, as it looks like Michael Majors is going to take a mulligan. Also looks like Majors has chosen to be on the draw. Our other match, if we do have time to jump that way, Brian Bronduin, who is X-2, playing against Tom Martell, who's X-1.
So for BBD there, a win and he stays alive. Martell wins and a lock.
Yep. A big comeback here for Tom Martell too. You know, he's been struggling a little bit in Grand Prix and Pro Tours recently.
Had a tough Pro Tour and Grand Prix finish both very recently.
Yeah.
But you're going to have runs like that. Matches a game with a lot of variance, and even the best players go through some dry spells. Happens.
He's a former Pro Tour champion. He's won Grand Prix over the course of his career. Tom's resume is flush with results, but he's going through, as you said, a bit of a dry spell.
If you really value consistency, if you look at top 16, top 25, medium finishes, all that kind of stuff, Martell is already on the verge of a Hall of Fame career. I don't think he necessarily gets the appreciation because he's a little light on Pro Tour top 8s. But if you value the consistency stats, and I do a lot, his career is already on the cusp of being in the Hall of Fame.
I was going to say, if you value consistency, Martell's your guy.
Yeah.
He's consistent as can be. Michael Major's going to take a look at 6. He's going to keep Vancouver Mulligan, allows him to scry. Ari Lax exiting the future match area. Tom Martell entering the future match area. If we have time to jump that way, we will. But right now, game number 2 is underway here between Manfield and Majors. Island to start here for both players. Seth with a Mountain. He'll pass the turn back over to Michael. Mountain was his draw step. He'll play it and pass the turn back over to Seth. An Island here for Manfield. And now it's a Vile Aggregate. Horribly Awry will take care of that. That counterspell does exile. That could come up later in this game, perhaps. Majors with an island. He'll play Kozilek's Chandler past that turn back. Pardon me, Kozilek's Sentinel. I do apologize. I'm out in his land number 4. Now, again, keep in mind, 2 brutal expulsions.
Though that's not a horrible counterspell to run into at this spot.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a 2-for-1. Manfield's not really leveraging the tempo in any way.
There's an attack for 1 by Majors, pass the turn back. An island here for Manfield. He'll pass the turn back. There's an attack for 1 by the Sentinel. Michael misses his land drop there. A mountain to play there for Seth. He's tapping 4 mana. We'll see what it's for. Vestige of Emrakul. Spell Shrivel. Gonna take care of that. Back to Michael Majors we go. He's got an Incubator Drone. And now this will allow for a little bit more of a healthier attack from the Kozilek Sentinel.
So far, so good for Majors. Kept Manfield off the board here, getting in for a couple points of damage.
Well, this is the kind of board position he wants to set up, given how his deck looks, right?
Yeah, at this point, Manfield, to stabilize his board, really wants one big play.
Yep.
Something like Deathless Behemoth would be great. And then those clutches really come into play.
It's almost like that's the kind of setup that Michael's trying to walk Seth into. Go ahead, play Deathless Behemoth. I'm going to bounce it. That's fine, too.
Yep.
Wavewing Elemental. It's likely that Michael, even if he doesn't have the 5th land to be able to awaken the clutch, he might just say, all right, 1 mana, bounce it, attack.
And he's found this turn a Halmer Tidecaller, which is not as good as land number 5 probably, but pretty close, as he can clutch and get the clutch back, use all of his mana this turn, attack for a bunch of damage, and still have a clutch left over.
Now, he does have the Eldrazi Scion if he'd like to clutch and awaken. That's an option. Wouldn't be able to attack with the land right away, but it is an option here for Majors. But I would be very surprised if he has no answer for the Wavewing. And unsurprisingly, there is a clutch, so the mountain will be awoken. Bounce the 3/4. Come on in for a couple of points of damage. And now we're going back Seth Manfield's way. Again, keep in mind, that first game, Seth saw Michael play 3 copies of Clutch Occurrence. Doesn't know he has 4. But as the game is being played, Seth has to imagine, okay, if I tap out for a big spell, that's probably going to get bounced.
Yeah, the difference between 3 and 4 doesn't appreciably change how Manfield plays. He has to respect the possibility of the card at all times. He also knows that he shipped that Halmer Tidecaller fairly late in the draft.
Yeah.
Very good chance that it landed Major's deck, which did.
Yeah, it was something that he paused on for a little while during the draft and said, you know, this doesn't really fit what I'm doing.
I think he only had 1 clutch at the time,
Yep.
and he took a Deathless Behemoth, a fine pick, but he has to respect a lot of copies of clutch out of Major's deck. And because of that, Manfield is probably loath to just tap out for a 6-mana play again. He knows this is likely to come back at him.
Seth giving a long look to the grip here. No, he's in some trouble right now. Majors at 20, Seth at 13, nothing on the table right now. Sure, he's got a spell he can play. He can just redeploy the Wavewing Elemental, but he's also got to think again. I'm not sure how good this is going to be, but he's going to give it a shot. He'll play that past the turn back. Majors is going to untap here. Michael will take a draw step. Picked up an island. You wonder how useful that will be this turn.
I know that he has a Tidecaller in hand, so the floor on his turn is get back clutch and clutch your thing and attack for a bunch. That's the worst thing that he does with this turn.
Seen worse turns.
And if you're in Manfield's spot there, because of all the copies of clutch, you'd be much happier making 2 lower impact plays than 1 big one, because you know about clutch. If Manfield was willing to tap out again, it's because he couldn't see an alternative.
There's a land for Michael. There's that island. Yep, and this is what you said. This is the floor on his turn. And still makes the turn real good.
Yep.
Going to play Howler Tidecaller, get back the Clutch Occurrence, bounce that Waving Elemental again. That thing, that's going to stay in your hand a little while, Seth.
And if that turn from Majors right there caused Majors to think for a long time, his hand's got a lot of really good routes.
Yep. Because clearly, he missed the land drop the previous turn. That means he played a land this turn. That means that grip, that's all spells. Don't know what they are, especially for Seth. You've got no idea. You're just hoping for not another clutch here, maybe. There's a mountain. There's Waving Elemental.
It's back.
It is.
One more time.
They oftentimes say third time's the charm, right? That's the saying.
Oh. Manfield is dead to a lot of stuff, and Majors has been missing land drops for quite a while now.
And Michael Straw was an island, so even lands right now aren't bad for Michael because you have to imagine he's got some things to do. And he's going to give this turn some thought. Quite a few options in hand for the Grand Prix San Diego champion. Looks like he says just attack step. Let's get in with everybody. Waving Elemental is going to block the land. Looks like 5 damage will come through. Manfield going to fall down to 2. Majors with a Boiling Earth. That will finish off the Wavewing Elemental. Hey, whatever it takes. An island pass a turn back. Not the most impressive turn there.
Still suitable.
Yeah.
I am shocked Manfield didn't die that turn.
Me too.
But that was still acceptable for Majors. 2 lethal threats, handful of spells, empty board on the other side.
All right, Seth Manfield. 7 lands on the battlefield. What can you do with them? Even a card like Brutal Expulsion right now, taking a look at just the creatures on the battlefield, toughness, Tidecaller, 3 toughness. The Incubator Drone, 3 toughness. And of course, the Kozilek Sentinel, 4 toughness. So can't even really work your way towards that. There is 4 mana, however. Can Seth find a way to stabilize? You see Manfield so unsure of himself. He's going to start by playing him out, and now he'll tap 4 mana. Incubator Drone for him. So he's got an Eldrazi Sign along with the 2/3.
And this on top of Brutal Expulsion does do some work in combat if Majors gets sloppy.
It does. 3 mana here for Manfield. Maybe not. The #1 player in the world, a little unsure of himself right now, how he can maybe stabilize this game. Got a lot to think about.
No margin for error right now,
No.
and he also has to play around a handful of spells.
It's tough when you know Michael's on action. He's just going to pass the turn back, 4 mana available. Now for Michael, red flag goes off there. He was tapping mana, untapping mana, tapping mana. Clearly he has an instant, or at least he's bluffing the instant very well.
And you saw Brutal Expulsion last game, and on this board, if you get sloppy, it could allow Manfield to get out of this turn okay with something in play going to his turn with all of his mana.
A mountain is where Matrix is going to start. Four mana. Looks like another Incubator Drone. And now that that's resolved, he says, I'm willing to serve. Let's get in here. To note, it's a colorless creature. That makes the Kozilek Sentinel a little bit larger.
Yep.
Makes it a lethal attacker. This is a lethal attack with all 3 creatures.
And I like this setup here for Majors because if you're playing around Brutal Expulsion, you set up a board state where Manfield has to bounce either something that you can recast this turn, which is the 2-mana play, or 2 creatures with very powerful enter the battlefield triggers. So you do some work hedging around the card you're likely playing around here.
And you see Michael doing a really nice job of playing around Brutal Expulsion. That's what he put him on because he saw it the previous game.
And there was no way for Manfield to do this any other way, essentially. He had to either bounce something. I think bouncing the tie collar is totally off the table. The incubator drone is not quite as bad, but still not something you're looking to bounce.
Well, what's the follow-up here for Michael?
I think just replaying the Sentinel, most likely.
Yep, and just passing the turn back. Yeah, the 2 damage from Brutal Expulsion went to the tie collar. That in combination with the Eldrazi Scion, that finished off the 3 toughness creature, and then the Sentinel got bounced. Recast it, passed the turn back. You see the board now here for Majors with 2 incubator drones, and Eldrazi Scion token, and that goes like Sentinel for Seth Manfield. A Touch of the Void is where his turn starts, and now Shatterskull Recruit is helping to stabilize.
On the table, he's still fine this turn.
Yep. A lot of ways he can die.
Yes.
But as far as things look on the table, Majors can bring him to 1. I believe Spawning Bed the land.
That's going to be a tough one to beat.
Yeah, that one is going to be hard. As a player, oftentimes you're not too worried about the land drop that someone's going to make, but this one does a lot right now. Four mana here from Seth. It's a Merc Strider. It's going to bounce the Eldrazi Scion for good. Spawning Bed going to go active. Now here's the interesting thing. You saw 1 Brutal Expulsion. You haven't seen 2.
Yep.
Expulsion's really good right now. Processor Assault. Going to take care of Shatterskull Recruit. Everyone's coming in. And now Seth Manfield will concede the game. So Michael Majors will tie things up here against Seth Manfield. The blue-red mirror is all tied up between these 2 great players, and they're getting ready for a third and very important one.
Last couple turns there, maybe a little tougher for Majors than he was anticipating, given the start he got off to there. I thought that game was going to be a total runaway after Manfield got bricked a couple of times, trying to get that Wave-Wing Elemental into play. But Manfield managed his resources well, settled the game down, you know. Even with Majors being aware of Brutal Expulsion and playing around it very well, Manfield almost got that one settled down.
He's not the world champion on accident. He's fighting back. He's clawing back here. Now, he'll get the option for game number 3, and if he'll play or draw. And we'll see what route he does want to go. Both players going back to the drawing board here. It's a competitive match between the 2, and there's a lot on the line here, too.
Yeah, and you can see the recipe for Majors in this matchup. He was able to win the battle on the board early on in the game. Couple counter spells, couple cheap threats on his side of the table. That created spots where Clutch was very powerful. He needs to get out in front of the board a little bit to maximize the power of that card. And Manfield getting 2 turns of having his whole turn swallowed up by that unsummon, that was able, those turns are where Majors got a huge edge. He was able to finally push the last couple points across the finish line, but those 2 turns set the stage for it.
Well, game number 3 about to be underway, and if you're joining us right now, you have chosen a pretty good time. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, Grand Prix Atlanta, brought to you by StarCityGames.com. Round number 14 of 15, we're watching Seth Manfield, a player that we watched draft this blue-red deck. He won last round against Doug Lambert in his green deck. Lambert's draws not coming together very well, but I think Seth was pretty heavily favored in the deck anyway, because he's got a pretty nice blue-red deck here.
His deck is very nice, but Major showing the recipe there from his side of the matchup. His deck's probably a little bit less powerful, at least in the matchup. I think I'd rather have Manfield's deck here for this particular matchup, but Majors with a winning recipe there in spite of them all again.
On our backup match, if we do have time to jump that way, it's Tom Martell, it's Brian Braun-Duin. Martell is 11 and, excuse me, let's make that 12-1 for Brian Braun-Duin. He's 11-2, so BBD, he can't lose. Martell, fortunately for him, he's got 1 to give.
And as we mentioned when we went into the round, we saw that X and 2 right now going all the way down to 29th place, possibly even further than that. So there's no drawing here for the X and 2s.
Yeah.
I think X and 2s are going to miss, in fact. So Martel, even at 12-1, which is a pretty phenomenal record, a lot riding on this game 3.
Our backup match was going to be Ari Lax versus Brian Eason. But Brian Eason, well, he cleaned Ari's clock pretty quick. So Ari Lax got his 3rd loss. Brian Eason will be playing the winner of this match next round.
We saw him 2-0 Shahar Shenhar as well.
Yep.
First round of this pod.
So just got through a 2-time world champion and then a Pro Tour champion.
Only got one of these 2 waiting for him.
Yeah. See, a lot of people don't know Brian Eason out there. He's an Atlanta local, good friends with Corey McDuffie, someone else from the area. Don't see him traveling much for Magic anymore. Pretty young guy, I think, going to Georgia Tech University now for college, but he can really cast him. He can really cast him. And anyone in Atlanta who plays Magic around here, you know that name. Both players take a look at the opener. Looks like Seth's going to keep his opening hand. Major's going to keep as well. Game number 3 underway here between Manfield and Majors. Island to start for each player. A mountain here for Seth. He'll just pass the turn back over to Michael. A mountain there for him. Back to Manfield we go. Who will make the first play? It'll be Seth Manfield with a Nettle Drone. Majors had horribly arrived for a spell from Seth on turn 2 last game. It doesn't look like he has it this game, however. Michael will just draw. It's an island. He'll just pass the turn back. Back to Seth Manfield. A mountain to start. Across for 3, he's going to come. Majors is going to fall down to 17. Seth have a follow-up. He does an incubator drone. Majors have an answer. We saw Spell Shrivel earlier. It's going to be Holy Awry this time. He had that for the Nettle Drone.
To me, this suggests he has something like a Boiling Earth to answer the Nettle Drone.
Okay.
Some 1 damage effect, because otherwise he would have just countered on 2.
Incubator drone here for Michael Majors. That'll slow down the Nettle Drone too. Majors probably really happy to trade that Eldrazi Scion with an Nettle Drone attack.
I don't think it's going to happen, but if it comes up, he'll definitely take it.
An island here for Seth. That's land number 5. Nettle Drone's going to shoot for 1. Majors will fall down a little bit lower. Now here's Merc Strider. Past that turn back, nothing for the Strider to exile. See what's next here from Michael. Remember, what we saw last game was a display on what his deck wants to do, get a little bit ahead, start casting Clutch of Currents in some way to get damage. Now, this is a Boiling Earth attack. That was a good try. A good try by Michael.
Might as well give it a shot.
Yep. 6 mana. Deathless Behemoth past the turn back. A shot here from Manfield. Gonna target Majors, past that turn back.
Again, trying to get out in front of the board here. No rush to kill the Nettle Drone. And with the Incubator Drone back on defense, even if Manfield has a clutch, it's not that bad. He can at least block the Strider.
What's really interesting, too, is that you make that attack, right? And Seth is going to play around Boiling Earth. And then you say, okay, I just snuck in 1 point of damage, sacrifice that, play my Deathless Behemoth. That was my plan my entire time. Seth might take him off of Boiling Earth now.
Yeah.
Now, for Seth, he's got a Deathless Behemoth of his own. Seth with 2 copies of that card in his deck, Michael with only 1. However, Michael's the one with all the clutches in his deck.
And this is a very good spot for an Awakened Clutch.
Yep. Remember, 4 copies in his deck. Does he have one right now? We know he's got Boiling Earth. He's been trying to set Seth up with it a little bit.
Well, I think Majors' draw is a little bit land heavy right now. He's not in a huge rush to answer the Nettle Drone, so he can either get more out of Manfield if he puts more one-type of his creatures on the board, or if combat goes a certain way. And the worst case scenario, he can awaken it, get the Neldron off the table, and get an extra threat for his troubles.
It's time to dig in. Michael Majors is in the tank, as we like to say here on SCG Live. It's a high-pressure situation here for both players. There's land number 6. It's a spawning bed. There is the clutch. Get the Deathless Behemoth out of here, awaken the island. Let's see what's going to come to the red zone. You have to imagine it's going to be something. Here comes the 3/3 island and the Deathless Behemoth. Keep in mind that does have vigilance. And hey, everybody, why not?
Yep.
Incubator drone 2. Put Manfield to the test. See how he wants to block. How does he value his resources right now? Now the world champion's got a lot to think about. He's underneath some real pressure. He's ahead in the life total race right now, but for how much longer, that's anybody's guess.
If Manfield doesn't have an answer to the 6/6 in hand, I think he's going to have to be likely to trade off the board here a little bit. He can't get into a damage race with Majors having so many copies of Clutch in the deck. So he needs to preserve his life total and keep the board as empty as possible.
A lot to think about here for Seth. We know he's got a Deathless Behemoth in hand. We know he's got 2 Brittle Expulsions in his deck. The question is, how does he want to do some blocking? It looks like he might have some interest in just chump blocking here, maybe a little bit. But keep in mind, Merc Strider 3 power on that creature.
Yeah, I think Manfield has a pretty big incentive to trade off here. Given the state of the board and the contents of Major's deck, I think getting into a damage race is very dangerous.
See, the one card Seth doesn't want to trade off, it appears, as Nettle Drone. So he says, you know what, I'm going to block. I'll shoot you down to 12. We'll trade resources. I'll take 6.
This is a complicated block, but it's the same one that I would have made.
Yep.
I don't think Manfield can afford to take a huge chunk of damage, untap, replay the 6/6, and be exposed to a bounce spell.
Major's quickly untapping, and he will be drawing. Let's see what he finds this time. Another clutch would be huge here for Michael. On our backup match, we're not jumping that way. Tom Martell has gotten the job done. He moves on to 13-1. And along with Dan Mussa, we're going to see him in the top 8 later this evening. So congratulations. 3 mana. We saw this play last time. It's Howler Tidecaller. Get back the clutch. Wow. Play a Benthic Infiltrator past the turn back. I thought it might be Tidecaller. Play the clutch, bounce the creature, but no. And now a chump block right away.
Well, I think that Majors is feeling a little threat light right now. Remember that the Tidecaller gives flying to all of your awakened lands?
It does, yes.
So he can bounce, in an ideal set of circumstances, can bounce one of the offending creatures and start getting in with both the Behemoth and the Flyer.
Wavewing Elemental, the follow-up there for Seth. Plays a mountain, passes the turn back. Not a lot to be concerned about in this particular format off of just a single mountain. So I don't think Majors has a lot to run through his head in that instance. But now the clutch feels a little bit weaker now.
Yeah, Outnumber is the one card you'd have to think about, but that doesn't really matter on this board.
Yeah.
Well, Major still has the option here. He doesn't have to bounce the Behemoth. He can bounce the Elemental, fire up a land, attack with that, and the Behemoth. If Manfield wants to trade Behemoths, that's okay. And the Flyer's in the clear.
All right, Behemoth gone for a single blue. Get in here for 6. Manfield going to take that damage. Does Majors have a follow-up? The answer is no.
Well, if the follow-up is a counterspell, that's just as good.
That's true.
And that's got to be on Manfield's radar now, because he could have simply awoken up the clutch there and gotten another 3/3 for his trouble.
Spell Shrivel going to take care of that Deathless Behemoth. This is a land for Seth. It's going to turn Wavewing into a 5-power creature. He's just going to pass the turn back. Over to Michael Majors we go. Michael still with that boiling earth in hand. He'll attack with his Vigilance creature. 6/6. Seth considering maybe a chump block here. Is he comfortable falling down to 1?
I don't know what his route is to win the game if he's chump blocking in this spot. With Majors at 12?
Well, he is chump blocking. Majors will just pass the turn back. He doesn't have any interest in doing anything. Going to make Seth do something pretty nice on this turn. Five mana here for Manfield. He's got a clutch of currents of his own. Turn on the mountain. Any interest in attacking?
I think Manfield probably is going to be holding back in this spot. No, going to go with an attack. I was going to say, representing Spell Shrivel here gives you some amount of play. Maybe Majors does something like just activating the spawning bed with his turn instead. I don't know if he can afford to trade 3 for 2 in terms of mana, unless there's a big follow-up here.
Here's Deathless Behemoth. Halimar Tidecaller going to come in. It's 9-5 in favor of Majors. Back to Seth Manfield we will go. Remember, 2 Brutal Expulsions to draw to here. Maybe those show up, maybe those play a role. Seth is already organizing mana for something. It's a Wavewing Elemental. He'll hold the mountain back on defense. Back to Michael Majors we go. He'll draw. I believe he picked up a copy of Wavewing Elemental of his own. Here's 2 mana. Tightening Coils.
That's a rough play here for Manfield because I think he was hoping to be able to double block, get the Behemoth off the table, only trade 1 card.
And now here's Coastal Discovery. Draw 2 cards here, Will Majors. The window is open to be able to do that. There's a mountain. And now he'll pass the turn back over to Manfield, who will quickly untap and take a draw step. 3 mana here for Seth. Tunneling Geopede, he'll play a land trigger. That Major's going to fall down to 8 from that landfall trigger. But Michael's the one that's quickly untapping now.
And once the board gets clear here, even if Manfield double blocks and gets the Behemoth off the table, that takes a lot of the power out of Brutal Expulsion. Manfield needs to, much like the clutches in Major's deck, needs to navigate the game into a bit of a damage race to really leverage those cards. If the board's a parity, that's hard to do.
There's your double block. Deathless Behemoth down, but so are those other creatures. The follow-up here is that Wavewing Elemental that Michael drew a couple turns ago. And now he'll pass the turn back over to Seth Manfield. And that is going to do it. Michael Majors is going to win this match over Seth Manfield 2-1. He's taken down the #1 player in the world and your current world champion. And for Majors, up to 12-2, and he's going to play against his friend Brian Eason with top 8 on the line next round.
And that game had some shades of Blue-Red Delver. Obviously, the cards are a lot more expensive and a lot less powerful, but a lot of the same philosophies applied.